Stonewall security becomes bigger issue after a threat in West Palm Beach. A threat of violence against South Florida's LGBTQ plus community has been stopped, but people are still on edge. A man has been arrested in Canada for making a very credible threat to Pride on the Block, which was held in West Palm Beach over the weekend. So, where does that leave security for Stonewall next weekend? In this week's SFGN, online and on stands tomorrow, I look at the cost of security for the festival. Wilton Manors Police Chief Gary Blocker tells me when you have 40,000 people in one area, it's imperative to have resources available on the spot in case of emergency. Better to have them and not need them than the other way around. But that costs money. Last week, we reported that security costs for Stonewall are jumping 80% from last year, and organizers weren't given the total until just 3 weeks until the festival. Now the incident in West Palm Beach, which involved a SWAT team, undercover officers in the crowd, Miami police, New York City police, and the FBI, has refocused attention on safety and its price. As Wilton Manors City Commissioner Chris Caputo wrote last week in SFGN, rising costs could make parties like this and Halloween's Wicked Manor celebration price prohibitive. And you can read more on the threat in West Palm, as well as the security issue in this week's SFGN online and on stands tomorrow. And thank God this was prevented in West Palm over the weekend, but there were 10 mass shootings over the weekend.
Yeah.
And in addition to the security price, which, I mean, at this point, we kind of have to say, okay, we'll pay it, but just give us more notice. Tell us what it's going to be. I think that's what it's going to come down to.
80% though, John? Holy crap.
But it's not just that. You have to think insurance. I mean, after the accident last year in the Pride staging area, in the parade staging area, that killed someone, thank God it wasn't a terrorist attack. It was just a terrible accident. But insurance with all these shootings and accidents like that are driving up the cost as well. I mean, it could literally, they could kill Pride simply by pricing us out.
So Al, I ask you that. Do you think that something like this would obliterate prides and events like that?
Oh, it's almost insidious. It's so dangerous. And the reason is because, well, first, there is a constitutional argument, a First Amendment argument, that a city has responsibility to protect for public events and demonstrations. It is a municipality responsibility, not an organizer of an event's responsibility. Okay. Because you could make a very good argument that this is the way you would curtail speech. Donald Trump in Washington basically was managing Black Lives Matter demonstrations by saying you can't, and aggressively managing against it. There's a very good constitutional argument against that. This is insidious from the standpoint of how can a nonprofit be able to pay the kinds of exorbitant expenses that we're talking about? And one other issue that I think is really, really significant at play here, just simply because approaching the Pulse, this Pulse story that we have done today, I reread the timeline. And it's a tough thing to read, but there is a timeline, minute by minute, starting at 1:58 a.m. through the conclusion, a minute by minute of what happened. It is interesting to me that the gun nuts, and that's what I call them, the conservatives that have no moral souls, and the gun nuts, their argument is, like Governor Abbott, everyone should carry a gun. It should be open and everyone carry a gun. That does not create safety. And Pulse proved that. There was an armed police officer at Pulse. This assailant that killed 49 and injured another 50 was attacked by the police officer with a gun within the first 2 minutes of the firing exchange. The police officer had to withdraw, not because the murderer had a gun, but because of the high-powered nature of these AR rifles, the police officer was outgunned and had to withdraw. SWAT was there in 10 minutes at Pulse and was so pinned down because of the high-powered nature of the weapons that existed in Pulse, they could not get to him. And it took hours to find an access of removing an air conditioner and ultimately a bulldozer going through a wall to get in the club to help free many of the people, which we told in the story didn't happen until about 5:30 in the morning. It is a lie. It is a lie. Guns do not protect people. Faye, you carry a gun to a club and an AR shooting begins to break out, you're as good as dead.
I'm dead.
I mean, and we look at Uvalde, which is the same. I mean, the police and there it took them over an hour.
Yeah.
And the fact of the matter is that the good guys with guns do not protect us from bad guys.
And don't have the guns that will even hold a
Exactly.
candle to the guns that some of these folks have.
And they say, we want to make constitutional carry or open carry, and DeSantis has talked about making this a constitutional carry state, even with everything that's happening with us having the second largest mass shooting in the country, the 5th largest school shooting in the country. What we know is that states that enact constitutional carry laws and let people carry their guns without a permit, that leads to a 13 to 15% increase in gun violence within the next 10 years.
And that is a statistical fact. It is science, but we know from COVID, science doesn't matter.
Science doesn't exist.
That is a statistical fact that is immediately dismissed
to a certain part of the population.
Yes,
and what I'm thankful for, though, is now you actually have GOP donors who are actually saying we do need to actually do something about this.
Wait, you go ahead.
No, I'm going to talk about this because it's not coming up for a couple of weeks, but there's going to be at UCC Church here in Fort Lauderdale. Reverend Rogers is the minister there. They're going to have Gun Safety Sunday on June 26th. They're going to be giving out gun locks because if you put a gun lock on your gun in your home, you significantly reduce the risk of accidental shootings, teenage suicide, and a murder or gun injury by domestic violence. So they're doing that. And the thing is, this program, which started with 10 gun locks to give away, is now being formatted and pitched to go throughout all of Florida's UCC churches and the 5,000 churches in the North American Fellowship. I'm not saying it's the solution. I'm just saying people are trying to do the right thing. And if people would just get out of the way, they could do it.
One final thought before we move on. I connect the dots that we're watching in a very confused American society. We talk about white, older, privileged men fighting against what we watch is going on of having minority growth, Latino growth, gay growth, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. We talk about toxic masculinity going on. We talk about rejection and violence, both in word and action, against Asians and against women and against gay and against Latinos and against Black. And we're starting to watch a common denominator. And when we talk about this story that John does about Palm Beach aimed at gays, and we talk about guns, Uvalde, and Buffalo, and even Pulse, we're in a situation where 1,000, I just read this week, 1,000 mass shootings. In the last 1,000 mass shootings, do you know how many women were the shooter?
Zero.
Zero. It's a connection, it's a dot connection that we have to go. There's something going on in our society that is amiss. And Tucker Carlson can scream to high heaven, white community is being attacked. But the results is white community is also the ones that are really are the attackers. And we have to be willing to face that as a statistical fact. Why is it happening? And what are we going to do about it? If not, Pulse is laissez-faire, as is Palm Beach. LGBTQ plus news is vital for our community and for the broader world as a whole. We have enough enemies at Fox News. Tucker, Sean, and Laura are loud. We need passionate allies. Happening Out Television Network, Queer News Tonight, and It's Happening Out are literally out of the closet and into the headlines. Our community needs your support. Like this broadcast and subscribe now to ensure the growth of the entire